I've taken the time, and I'm not sure if others have here, to go through the 423 pages of the feasibility study, which I would like to rename the Beezer Profitization Maximization Study, because that's really what it is. I can't believe this has been allowed by the Region 4 EPA. I want to put the blame where it belongs. I don't think it belongs with the good folks at the EPD. I don't think it belongs with the good folks of the city or the health department. I'm a little concerned maybe that the Florida DEP is not doing their job as well as they should, but I think that the major burden of this falls upon the EPA not doing their job. I had hoped there was going to be an overhead here today, because I took the time to print out this diagram, which is in your presentation as well. And for those of you who haven't taken time to look at this, it's on page 291, okay? And this is the samples taken on the Koppers site. What's of concern to everybody is the little pink dots, okay? Those are soil sample readings that are above the Florida. Thank you, John. This one's in color, but yours, that same diagram right there. And the pink markers indicate where they are above the cleanup threshold levels, the soil cleanup threshold levels. That's what SCTL means. By the way, there's 4 pages of acronyms. You need to get familiar with those too. When you overlay on top of that the recommended remedy for the site, this is an overlay color. This is where the overhead would come in handy. You see, we're not really cleaning up the site, are we, folks? That's not even half. It's probably not even 40%. Does everybody see that? Okay, so the soil in the western half of the site is still so toxic that if a teenager trespasses on it, he's already exceeded his 1 in a million lifetime risk of getting cancer probably by 1,000-fold. Now, that data is actually in the HHRA. That's another study, the Health and Human Risk Assessment that AMAC did for Beezer, and it's 500 plus pages, so when you get time, read that too. There's really interesting data in there about how if they get more women working at Koppers, they'll have to change the plan. Did you know people only work at Koppers for 6 months? That's what the Human Health Risk Assessment says. And I find that really hard to believe, because I know people that work in the treated wood industry. They call me because they have health problems, because they're dying of this disease or that disease from being exposed to CCA. They ask for help. And in general, people that work at treated wood facilities work there for a number of years. And they're unaware of the health risks that they're exposed to. They're unaware that by just tromping around in the dust, they're being exposed to cancer risks that are magnitudes above what anyone should ever have to be exposed to. So then I'm concerned about the residents as well in the soil that's west of Koppers and probably north and maybe some east. Even people that go to wards are being exposed to dust that's blown off this site. I don't understand how we can clean up any soil until we close Koppers and get rid of the point source.
Yes.
And I think that's what actually meets the requirements of the law, because I actually took the time to read that too. So I'm talking about State Statute 376.81, brownfield site and brownfield areas contamination cleanup criteria. Has anybody read that? Because I do recommend that you do. And one of the things that it says in here, and I want to point out, and I've seen no one discuss this, is, it's real short, consider the additive effects of contaminants. The synergistic and antagonistic effects shall also be considered when the scientific data become available. So we're talking about, well, what does CCA do to you? Chromated copper arsenate, hexchromium, arsenic. We already know how bad that is. By itself, it has negative synergistic effects. But we're also talking about benzoapyrenes, which is a creosote derivative, and we're talking about dioxins, which, by the way, you got to get familiar with that acronym, TCDDTEQ. So when you look at this chart then, which shows those levels in the neighborhoods, and you look at the little blue values, those are the negative values that are above the SCTLs we're concerned about. I recommend everybody study this, because the letter that was sent by AMEC, and I had I requested from Mr. Moose and got a copy of it, said that there were only 3 samples that were above. 3 samples that were above. Well, I guess we can't count to 4, because when I actually take the number of the sample and I compare it to the chart, it's in blue. So one of the samples they're saying is okay, is 7.3 parts per trillion. Yes, 7.3 parts per trillion does not meet the Florida SCTLs. And I am talking about specifically the sample that is on 30th Avenue, okay? So I don't understand if a sample is 6.9 parts per trillion, let's just call it 7. If it's 7.3 parts per trillion and it's on here in blue, that's not an acceptable soil sample. So that's at least 4 and maybe 5, okay? So let's not call it 3. What we really need to do is we need to do the job right. We don't need the neighbors in the Stephen Foster neighborhood or the children who go to the elementary school to be guinea pigs. It's totally unacceptable for this to go on like it has. What we need to do is insist that the EPA and Beezer go back out and take more samples so we can delineate which areas are contaminated. People who have dioxins in their yard and arsenic above the SCTLs shouldn't have to live there. They shouldn't have to be exposed to that cancer risk. Their property should be bought out and cleaned up. Or at a very minimum, the soil should be scraped out of their yard, scraped over onto that 90-acre site, and disposed of properly. And these people should be compensated for the damages they've had to suffer since their property will be worthless or near worthless ad infinitum. Thank you for your time.